On the morning of June 13th, 1996, the body of Angie Dodge was found in her apartment in Idaho Falls, Idaho. She was 18 years old. She had been there since the early hours of the morning. The DNA recovered from the scene was clean, usable, unambiguous. It did not match the man who would be convicted of killing her. It did not match him at trial. It did not match him when he was sentenced to 40 years in prison. It did not match him when he served 20 of those years and was released. The DNA sat in an evidence freezer, pointing at someone else, while the wrong man aged inside a cell. This is the story of Angie Dodge, of Christopher Tapp, and of the man who lived across the street.
18-year-old Angie Dodge was killed at her home in Idaho Falls. The killer left DNA at the scene, but police could not find a match for nearly 2 decades.
Court, Carol Dodge came face to face with the man she believed killed her daughter.
I just blurted out, "You beast, you," because he was the first person I could put a face to that had killed my daughter.
Angie Dodge was 18 years old in the summer of 1996. She had just moved into her own apartment in Idaho Falls for the first time. A second-floor unit, a small space, the kind of apartment that feels like freedom when you're 18 and finally doing things on your own terms. She was part of a loose group of young people who spent their evenings by the Snake River, the kind of sprawling social circle that forms in small American cities, where everyone knows everyone and the same faces show up at the same places. Her mother, Carol, described her as a force. Her friends knew not to get in her face. She took care of herself. On the night of June 12th, Angie went out. She came home. She went to sleep. She did not show up for work the following morning. When someone went to check on her, they found what Idaho Falls police detective Jeff Pratt would later describe as the most horrific scene he had encountered in 15 years on the job. A teddy bear near her bed was soaked in blood. On her body, investigators found a handprint and DNA left by her killer. The case had a suspect before it had a name. What it did not have, what it would not have for 23 years, was the right one. The investigation begins. Idaho Falls Police Department spent the summer and fall of 1996 without an arrest. Then in January of 1997, a man named Benjamin Hobbs was arrested in Nevada on an unrelated charge. Hobbs was connected to the Snake River social group. Police began pulling in his associates. One of them was a 20-year-old named Christopher Tapp. Tapp had known Angie. He had been seen with her the night before she died. He was, by the accounts of people who knew him, a slightly troubled kid, someone still trying to figure out his life, who loved his friends and his mother and his marijuana, and not much else in particular. He came in to talk. He said he didn't know anything. That should have been the end of it. It was not the end of it. Pause. The psychology of false confessions. What happened next requires a specific kind of understanding, because what happened next defies the most basic assumption most people carry about themselves. Most people believe, with complete certainty, that they would never confess to a crime they did not commit. The research on this is consistent. People rate themselves as essentially immune to false confession. They imagine they would resist. They imagine they would simply tell the truth and that the truth would be enough. What the psychological record shows is that this belief is wrong. Not occasionally wrong, systematically wrong. False confessions occur in a specific set of conditions: prolonged isolation, sleep deprivation, implied or explicit threats, and, critically, the repeated suggestion that cooperation will be rewarded while resistance will be punished. The subject does not break because they are weak. They break because the human nervous system is not designed to sustain indefinite resistance against a perceived authority that controls every aspect of the environment. Christopher Tapp was brought in for questioning 9 separate times over 23 days. The sessions totaled more than 28 hours. He was threatened with the death penalty. He was told that if he cooperated, things would go better for him. He was shown crime scene photographs. When he appeared not to know the details, investigators expected him to know. Steve Drizin, a clinical professor of law at Northwestern University and one of the world's leading experts on false confessions, later reviewed the tapes of Tapp's interrogations at Carol Dodge's request. He called it the worst example of police contamination and fact-feeding he had ever seen in his career. Tapp eventually confessed. He said he had been in the apartment. He implicated 2 other friends. His DNA did not match the sample from the scene. None of the friends' DNA matched either. The police theorized that multiple people had been involved. A theory constructed, it would later become clear, specifically to explain away the DNA evidence rather than follow it. In 1998, Christopher Tapp was convicted of the rape and murder of Angie Dodge. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Across town, a man named Brian Dripps went about his life. Brian Lee Dripps Sr. had been living directly across the street from Angie Dodge on the night she was killed. He was interviewed by police during a neighborhood canvass 5 days after the murder. They did not ask for his DNA. 7 weeks after the murder, he left Idaho Falls. Over the following years, Dripps built what his defense attorney would later describe as a relatively normal life. He worked, he had children, he took vacations, he was a devoted son, a solid father figure, a solid friend. He knew what he had done. He did not tell anyone. Christopher Tapp spent those same years in a cell. He appealed his conviction in 2001. The Idaho Supreme Court upheld it. He appealed again. The courts rejected him again. In 2007, the Idaho Innocence Project took up his case. A professor who reviewed the interrogation tapes concluded he had been coerced. In 2012, limited DNA testing was done on additional items from the crime scene. Tapp was excluded. So was every other man who had been named. The DNA kept pointing at someone else. The system kept looking away. It was not a judge or a prosecutor who finally refused to accept this. It was Carol Dodge, Angie's mother, the woman who had originally called for the death penalty for Christopher Tapp. After watching the interrogation tapes in 2013, Carol concluded that the confession was coerced. Instead of wanting Tapp executed, she began fighting to free him. She tracked down Dreesen. She pushed for new testing. She would not stop. In 2017, under pressure from the Innocence Project, and with public scrutiny growing, prosecutors made Tapp a deal. His rape conviction was vacated. His murder sentence was reduced to time served. He walked out of prison in March of 2017, still technically convicted of murder, but free. Carol Dodge was one of the first people he embraced. The case was not closed. The real killer had not been identified, but Tapp was out, and somewhere in Idaho, Brian Dripps was still living his life. In late 2018, Idaho Falls authorities made one more attempt. They submitted the crime scene DNA to a genetic genealogist named C.C. Moore, the same approach that had identified Lewis Williamson in the Esther Gonzalez case, the same technology that was rewriting the limits of what cold cases could be solved. Moore built a genealogical profile from the DNA. She searched. She found distant relatives. She built family trees. 6 potential suspects emerged from the lineage. None matched completely. Then she found a 7th, a small library obituary for a woman whose son had the wrong last name. The name Dripps had been raised under was not his biological father's name. The 7th man in the lineage was Brian Lee Dripps Sr. He had lived in Idaho Falls in 1996. He had lived across the street from Angie Dodge. He had been interviewed by police in June of that year and sent home. Investigators tracked Dripps to Caldwell, Idaho, 300 miles away. They surveilled him. They waited. On a day in May of 2019, Dripps discarded a cigarette butt from his car window. Investigators retrieved it from traffic. The DNA was a complete match. On May 15, 2019, Brian Lee Dripps Sr. was arrested. During questioning, he confessed. He said he had been drunk and high on cocaine. He said he had gone into Angie Dodge's apartment, intending to assault her. He said she fought back. He said it just happened. He said he did not know Christopher Tapp. 2 months later, on July 17, 2019, a judge vacated Tapp's murder conviction entirely. Judge Alan Stevens told him, As far as the court is concerned, you are cleared of the charges you have been living under for the past 20+ years. In 2021, Brian Dripps pleaded guilty and was sentenced to a minimum of 20 years to life. At sentencing, Carol Dodge stood before the man who had killed her daughter and told him, "My last words to her were, 'I love you.' I held her in my arms. Never again was I ever able to hold her again because of your actions. I cannot forgive you. Ever." Todd Dodge, Angie's brother, asked the court to consider Christopher Tapp a victim as well. Dripps, he said, had dropped an atomic bomb in the center of their family and their community. In 2022, Idaho Falls settled a wrongful conviction lawsuit with Christopher Tapp for $11.7 million. Tapp said, "No dollar amount could ever make up for the over 20 years of my life I spent in prison for crimes I did not commit." In September of 2023, Tapp recorded what he said would be his final public interview on the case, with Dateline, at his home in Idaho. He said he did not want to be remembered as the man from the Angie Dodge case. He wanted to be remembered as an advocate. 2 months later, Christopher Tapp was shot and killed in Las Vegas. He was 47 years old. But here is what this case is really about. It is not about Brian Dripps. He is the simplest element in this story. A man who did a terrible thing, hid it for 23 years, and was found by a cigarette butt in traffic. His psychology is almost beside the point. What this case is about is a different kind of failure. The kind that requires no malice, only certainty. The Idaho Falls Police Department was certain Christopher Tapp was involved. When the DNA did not match, they did not revise their certainty. They expanded their theory to accommodate it. Multiple perpetrators, a conspiracy, a narrative that could absorb any, contradicting evidence without requiring them to start over. Psychologists call this tunnel vision, the cognitive narrowing that occurs when investigators become emotionally committed to a conclusion before the evidence supports it. It is not unique to bad actors. It is in fact more common among people who genuinely believe they are doing the right thing. Certainty feels like competence. Changing course feels like failure. The only person in this story who changed course was Carol Dodge, a mother who wanted the death penalty for her daughter's killer, watched a videotape and concluded she had been wrong. That required something most institutions are structurally incapable of: the willingness to absorb the cost of being wrong rather than transfer it to someone else. Christopher Tapp absorbed that cost for 20 years. He got out, he rebuilt, he got married, he advocated for others, and then he was shot in a city far from Idaho Falls, living a life he had pieced together from the wreckage of something that should never have happened. I think about that a lot.